What's up, guys? Jeff and Jamion here with Winning in the Margins. Jamion, just coming back off of vacation, man. Thoughts been going through your mind, and we were talking about getting refreshed for the game, March, April. I'm gonna say portal opens up for college basketball coaching, man. We were just talking, and go ahead and just continue.
Yeah, I mean, we were just kind of rapping about what the next few months look like, and I was like, man, we should try to record this and just kind of see, just let it be genuine and real about what's going on and how it feels. Obviously, was a head coach for 10 years in college basketball. I've worked at all different levels of Division I. I've actually been a Division III assistant as well at the very beginning. And so, Jeff asks really good questions that make you dive in deeply to kind of figure out where you are. And so obviously we got fired in March, which is a really interesting process, being fired, because, when you're a head coach at 29 years old, it's mean you've had so much success moving forward and moving quickly. You think you're going to be a head coach for the next 45 years. And so when you finally get that moment where you go into your AD's office and human resources is sitting there, you sort of know what time it is. And so since that day, it's been a humbling experience, but I've always been pretty humbled. But Jamie, I've had to learn a lot.
That humbling experience. So you've had a break. You've had a gap in the coaching career for first time in years. What do you think this gap has done for you? What has it allowed you to see within the game, within the game, that not having a break, a forced break, wouldn't have allowed you to see that's going to make you better on the other side?
Yeah, I mean, I think being refreshed is really beneficial. I probably know more about college basketball right now than I've known since I was 20, 21 years old, because I'm getting a chance every single night to watch how every team is playing, to watch how every team is being coached. I could probably predict the finishes of these conferences right now just because I've seen every team play, barring injury and stuff like that. And so, number one is just, it's interesting, Jeff, because I've never been a guy that felt like I was bigger than the game or bigger than where I worked. There's a lot of guys that feel like the basketball at that school is going to end when they leave. I would always tell our players, we're renting the space that we're in. I'm renting this desk. I'm renting this office. You're renting that locker. We're going to leave here and basketball is going to continue. So I say it's been humbling just because it's forced me to look inward and to really have a deep assessment of things that went great, things that didn't go well, things we could have made a better decision on. And just to be honest with myself and honest with, just where we are within the game.
What's something that you feel you do great and the downtime you've been able to really see that area of your coaching game and what it brings to the table?
Well, I think I'm really dangerous when I'm able to build a plan. So I think this year off is going to be really dangerous wherever we are a year from now, because me being able to sit back and build a plan out and to watch how the movements in the market is happening in college basketball, I'm a really strong plan builder and executor. I've always sort of been that way. And so being able to be on the forefront of that, I think is going to really be a benefit. I've been really strong in that area. To be able to predict when you go in and say, hey, I think we can turn this around in a year. I think we can turn this around in 3 years. I think we can turn around in 4 years. I've been able to basically do that at every opportunity because I believe in a plan. And I believe there's a lot of things that you can predict. Conversely, the last 3 years of my coaching career at GW, it was the last 2 years really, was the most, you couldn't plan for that. We couldn't plan for a pandemic. We couldn't plan for NIL. We couldn't plan for transfers being able to move freely. There was just no way to really plan for that at the time. And so I have to also be honest with myself, is that I'm a great planner, but you also can't plan in an uncertain market. Right. And so, with each one of these things I say I'm really strong at, you then look on the flip side, because really, if you're strong in an area, you're going to lean into that so much more. And if the market's kind of flip and turn, you're going to flip and turn and you'd be forced to try to figure out another way. And so I just kind of offer that. I would say, secondly, really strong community builder. Every place we've been.
Before we go to community, can I ask a question on that? So So from way back, it was the plan that led the direction. And then you come into a world the last couple of years that COVID took over, the year was crazy, NIL was introduced, and that kind of throws a monkey wrench in your plan. And so with the plan having holes poked in it, having that downtime and looking back, have you seen how you would take the chaotic path and do that differently?
Yeah, I think it's let's talk about a few of the plans,
Okay.
just briefly. So Mount St. Mary's, no one told me to take this job when we took it. They're like, oh, this is a really tough job. They're really struggling. You're in that one bid league. But I'd played there. I knew the area well. The history of the league at the time said you needed the best player from Washington, D.C. in the league. If you had the best Maryland player, D.C. player from the league, you're going to have the chance to win a championship. Up to that point, that'd been the case. Most Southern school, I wanted to play a really athletic style of play. We called it mayhem. Being the most Southern school is important because you typically have more athletes below the Mason-Dixon line than above it. And then you have more schools north of the Mason-Dixon line. So all those schools and every league are sort of fighting over the same players. And by the time you get to the Northeast level, there's less athletes. So we had the most Southern corridor. So we got into Charlotte and North Carolina and Virginia and really tried to pull that Dallas. We really pulled from different areas like that gave us the ability to do that. So that was sort of the plan at the Mount, to just dominate our 3-hour radius and then use BWI Airport to Charlotte and Raleigh to be able to recruit direct flights. Plan worked pretty well. We were able to really build that way. Also, to look at transfers. Before people were taking transfers, we were taking them. We felt like, man, people had this negative connotation about transfers. I'm a big believer in people, so let me get to know the transfers on the market. So we'd always recruit really high, knowing that guys would leave or not have success, have an opportunity to bring them back home. That was a big way we built it at the Mount. We get to Siena, and this is a little bit out of region. I mean, people said to me, like, you can't recruit this region. You've never been up here before. New York is so different. We signed Sloan Seymour, Jalen Pickett. Sloan Seymour made 93s. Jalen Pickett is going to be a pro and is going to be all Big Ten this year at Penn State. We really didn't have an issue with that up there because, you could tell there that, number one, Siena is such a passionate fan base and has such reverence in the New York area. We could reach down to New York City. We could reach out to Buffalo. I mean, anywhere in New York, it had such a name. We felt like we had an opportunity there to really just lean on the name of Siena. And so, when you look at that, the plan there was pretty simple. I thought we had a good roster there. We had a kid named Evan Fisher, another guy named Manny Camper's in the G League right now. And we really liked how both those guys played. We felt like they fit into our style of play. Now, we didn't think we'd be able to press and trap, but we thought we'd be able to shoot a ton of threes because at the time, the MAC didn't take a lot of threes. It was sort of like a mini Big East where you played inside, outside so much. So we just knew analytically that if we were able to add a couple more guys that could shoot the ball, we'd be able to flip our numbers pretty quickly. I think we end up having the MAC record for threes made in a season by a team, and a guy named Kevin Degnan, Sloan Seymour made a ton of threes for us that year. And so you kind of look at those plans, and those things really worked out well. Also, wanted to bring guys back home. Albany City Rocks, a great AAU team there, great AAU team. Jim Hart's an amazing person, just a great guy, but all his teams train in Albany. So we felt like they've got a lot of guys that go high major. If we can get one or two of those guys to come back home, we don't need all of them. We just need one or two of those guys to come back home. We got a kid named Elijah Burns who transferred from Notre Dame to Siena. They kind of started a graduate program around the same time. Elijah Burns is one of the best players in the country. The 1 year he was there with Coach Carm. And, and now they've been able to bring some guys back as well. So we starting that trend of bringing guys back home, which is kind of a common theme for the places that I've been. And so that's kind of the plan at Siena. And then when we talk about GW,
what percentage was the what percentage of transfers? Did it depend on the school?
Yeah, and that's the part when we talk to the GW plan, it'll be kind of interesting because, they have really good transfers. You do need to have some graduate programs because a lot of times they're coming in with a lot of credits on one end.
Okay.
And so there are some mechanics to it. But you just want to, for me, I just want to find guys that are really hungry to play.
What did you spot in their character? So the NIL has everybody going into the portal, and it's chaotic. There's going to be I believe there's going to be chaos with some teams who have had a history of winning. There's going to be some up and down years with teams that don't necessarily understand what they're doing, but they're throwing a dart at the wall, may find a win here, and then get back to their losing ways. Yeah. But you were acknowledging that transfers worked. What was the character you were looking for in a transfer?
Well, number one, the hunger is important. I learned. We're going to talk a little bit about experiences, but I learned. One of the transfer brought in at the Mount. I won't say the kid's name. Was a great player. Came in from the Big East, played for us, was great. In our first conversation, he was talking to me about what position he wanted to play, which is a pretty typical conversation.
Yeah.
That's not anything different because a lot of times guys feel like they play out of position. So we brought him in. We tried to play him at the position. Things that worked. Sometimes it did, sometimes it didn't. But I learned was every other guy that we brought in that was a transfer that didn't ask about position ended up being really, really successful. And they just didn't ask. It was like, I just want to play.
They just wanted to play.
I don't care where you play me. I just want to have a chance to be on the floor and to show and do what I can do. So that hunger overseeded everything else. And the guy that transferred in that was talking about position was a good player too. So it wasn't like, but those other guys took huge jumps and they fit into our team
right
seamlessly, where there was some ego when the guy asks you about position.
Yeah. When you know what you want, there's going to be some ego involved.
Right.
That counters the production of the team.
Right. Yeah. It can counter. Counter.
In my experience, has a really good ability to counter.
Yeah. Right. You know what I mean? Yeah. Because sometimes what they want is completely in alignment with what you need.
Right.
Right. And so if that happens, it's completely in alignment. It's going to kind of go in the same direction. But I definitely feel like the passion of a person who's just I just want to get on the floor, coach. I don't care what position it is. And so that was number two. I wanted someone who's going to trust me. That, how I like to coach our team, how I like to be around our team. That trust is really important. You think about transfers coming in, they've had broken trust along the way.
Yeah.
Someone's told them along the way, you're going to be this position, you're going to do this, you're going to do all these things. And they got there and didn't get to do any of those things. So what I try not to do is I try not to overpromise. I just try to say, like, at the end of the day, do you trust that I'm going to do what I say I'm going to do? And I show them evidence that we've done that time and time again. So I think those things are really important. If I had to offer a third, it would be someone that wants to do something bigger than themselves.
Okay.
A lot of times you're getting a transfer who is a guy who, we had a lot of guys who were top 75 the last couple of years. And I leaned on this early experience for these guys. They want to become pros. They want to have an opportunity to play and do all these things, which are great. But you really want the guys to, because I just want to help you win a championship. Yeah, I know if we can win a championship, I can prove that I'm a part of a winner. Those guys tend to be so much more aligned with the team dynamic. And then they end up playing well too. I mean, they're talented players, going to be in a system that's going to be built around them in some ways. They're going to play well and perform well.
Right on.
So I kind of give you all that to say when we got to GW, it was actually a different plan because we've been so good with, we talk about the transfers we were taking in the first two spots. We were basically trying to take one transfer a year and give them opportunity, and they had to be able to play above the level we're at.
You froze on me for a second. Can you say that again?
So I would say, like, at the other opportunities, we were trying to take one transfer a year, and they had to be above that level to play. So that way you knew their talent was going to be so immense, they were just going to play a ton.
Got it.
They're going to be able to make some mistakes, but their talent was going to overwhelm it. When we got to GW, we kind of take all that transfer experience we have, and we look at the history of George Washington basketball in the last 15 years. 10 years. I think we looked at 10 years. And in the 10 years, there'd only been like 3 or 4 guys that started as a freshman that graduated from GW that were ended up being impact players.
Okay.
So when we looked at it, we said, you know what, this is really interesting. And then knowing the history of Washington, D.C. players will leave. They're going to leave home. They're going to go to the ACC, the Big East, the Pac-12, the Big Ten, and then they're going to come back home. Knowing that history, we said, like, this doesn't make any sense. You look at the history of GW, everyone's trying to take high school kids. These high school kids aren't even making it to the end, and very few of them are impact players or ever become all-conference players and stay. When you also looked at it, the transfers had done so well at George Washington.
Okay.
For a couple of reasons. An 18-year-old, a city is not as attractive to an 18-year-old because they can't do any of the stuff the city provides.
Right
You
on.
can't do anything until you're 21 in a city.
Yeah.
So, you get a transfer who's been 2 years in the college or 21 years old. The city's now a great place.
Understand.
The nightlife is great. They're more comfortable being who they are and going different places in the city, and the city becomes great. So it really made a lot of logical sense to say, well, let's flip this model, take 1 or 2 high school kids a year, and let's bring in top 100 transfers coming back home, because we just didn't feel like at that point we were going to be able to beat Dayton, VCU, Richmond out for the very best high school players, Davidson for the very best high school players. And our program wasn't established enough.
Yeah.
But for a transfer given opportunity, and knowing the history we'd had with it, we said let's double down and let's bring in more transfers. And we also thought that the transfer rule will change at some point where you could only transfer once freely. So we were like, it behooves us to get more transfers in early because then they can't leave later. And now we might get a 2 or 3 year window with them. GW also has a great graduate school.
Okay.
So we can take one graduate. So before we were talking about taking one transfer a year, this time we said we're going to take one graduate student a year.
Right
on. We're going to take more transfers that are first year out of college, second year out of college, and try to fill the roster that way. So we really kind of flipped the dynamic of it in terms of building out the plan. And that's just a plan for the roster. There's a plan for the community build and all that stuff. But
yeah,
that was like the plan for the roster. And, really looking, they hadn't had an all-conference player in 2 or 3 years before we got there. We had 3 this past year. We had 2, I think, my second year there. And both those years we had guys that averaged nearly 20 points a game or first or second in the league in scoring.
And these were guys you recruited.
And these are guys that we recruited and that we brought in there. So the hard part about when you're talking about reflecting, it's like, well, that shit worked.
Yeah, yeah.
We took a chance on how to bring in better players, and it worked. Because you can't win in the A-10. You need 4 top 22 players in the league. Our data also says that. If you have 4 top 22 players in the league, you're not going to win the league.
Got it.
Right?
Got it.
So there's also a component to that where it's like you just need some elite players that can kind of fit in. And we recognized pretty early we weren't going to get those elite players to stay. We had guys like Jamison Battle, who's one of the best players in the Big Ten right now. Led the Big Ten in scoring last year. Jameer Nelson Jr., who's one of the best players now in Delaware history. And everyone goes, man, you guys weren't able to hold on to those guys. Well, it wasn't for lack of trying.
Yeah.
But for 10 years in a row, those great high school players have left GW before me, 2 coaches before me, the coach after me, the coach before me. Those guys leave GW.
Got it.
And they go to an opportunity that's in a higher league, and they typically perform pretty well.
Okay.
So them leaving is not like an indictment on anything more than just that has been typical at George Washington. We hope to change that, but to keep the high school guys around, you have to have a level of success and connectivity, and we just weren't at that stage yet.
Yeah.
But I was very confident we're going to be able to get there. And so, you look around, you go, man, like now you look at their team, you go, they've got a guy named James Bishop, who's going to be top. I think he's top 15 in the nation right now in scoring right now.
Okay.
We didn't have that when we got there, and so a large part when you talk about reflecting, it's like, did the plan work? It did. Some of the wrenches in the middle made it tough and difficult to navigate, and maybe we missed a couple steps along the way. But, that plan to get the roster better, and then we had 2 guys, Breon Freeman, who transferred to Rhode Island when I left, and a guy named Joe Bamisil, who led the league, who was second in the league in scoring last year. Those guys would help that team right now.
Yeah.
That gives you 3 top 22 players right there. We need to add 1 more. Now you got a chance to win a championship. And that's just right. And that's just about building a roster, looking at the data and just knowing exactly what you need.
Okay.
I kind of gave you a lot there, but
no, I love the recruiting aspect. I love the intuition of understanding where you are, looking back at the 10-year gap and knowing the high schoolers not what we want first. Maybe that becomes where we go year 4. Maybe that's where we go year 3, but we've got to get a winning tradition to keep the high school around. And so what's been successful is the guys that have gone out of town figured they didn't fit into whatever culture they went to, and now they're looking to come back home, and we've got ball players there looking to build 1 into 4 keep that cycling over year after year. And now we've got a winning tradition that a high schooler is going to come and stay in. Love how you look at that, man. It's dynamite.
Yeah, exactly. And then we ended up with, I think we ended up 4 top 75 players over the last 2 years.
And so now we're keeping scholarships available instead of giving them away to a high schooler. Am I reading that?
Yeah, exactly. So there's a lot. I was like really, it's gonna sound bad. I learned a lot from the experience. We also looked and said, we have 13 scholarship players. Do we need 13 scholarship players? Through the research we looked at, we go, we've never had a player come in at 11, 12, 13 and become a top rotational player for us. And for us, we've either brought a guy in that was a freshman or brought a transfer in, and those guys play. They might not play 30 minutes, but they play. Yeah. And you sort of know what you're going to get. And the guys we've taken 11, 12, 13 were guys we say, well, in a year or two, he's going to be here. Or if we develop him, he's going to do this. And we just recognize in this market, there's going to be none of that. Right? Any of the high school players that we brought in to do that or 10 years before in that window, those guys all left and went and played somewhere else. Okay. So, we did something kind of radical is we said, we're not going to bring in 12 and 13 scholarship player.
Okay.
What we're going to do to overhaul the roster is we're going to bring in 6 walk-ons, and we're going to allow them the opportunity to earn that 12th or 13th scholarship. So we sort of flip the dynamic to get more workers and more people that want to go to school at GW to balance out the roster a little bit with the final 6 guys.
Okay. Now that 12th and 13th scholarship, were those good for the transfers as well?
Well, we didn't want to use those for those transfers. We just wanted to go we really wanted to get to 1 through 10. A year ago, we were 1 through 11. We wanted to get to 11 guys that we would call scholarship guys. Let the walk-ons earn the last 2 spots over time. So there's a work component that allows them to get in there, which will allow that into the roster to keep working to have that scholarship to get there. And I think that work component is really important, trying to tease out entitlement and bring in work.
Yeah.
But then I thought what also, Jeff, I thought was important was I wanted us to have, and actually I'll give you 2 things. Number one, we took those final 2 scholarship spots last year and we made them graduate assistant spots. We had 3 graduate assistants. GW had never had GAs before, and GAs are pretty important to how we like to operate. Okay. Because they can get in and work with the players and rebound for them and spend time. Everyone that's around your program, Jeff, is a person that can give you information.
Yeah.
They're like an information contributor. So you want more players, you want more people around them that can share the message, can have them vent to. Because if they don't have those people, they're going to go outside the team dynamic to do that. Right, and that's always sort of dangerous. So it's kind of uncommon. We couldn't get GAs. We couldn't figure that out. So I said, let's just take the scholarship money here and let's bring in 3 GAs so our players have people that can rebound for them and spend time with them and just do different stuff, can run errands for us and, to get that work component right. Yeah. But then the other side of that was, let's keep the bulk of our team closer to the top.
Okay.
Right. So if I got 11 guys on scholarship or 10 guys on scholarship and we play 8 guys, well, if one person goes down, I got to play 9.
Yeah.
If another person goes down, I got to play 10. And what that did was it kept everybody engaged.
Okay.
We're really finding out that 11, 12, 13, and usually the top walk-on, right? So let's say 14, those guys are getting really engaged really unengaged through the year. Again, we're trying to build a championship culture.
Yeah.
So you're going to have some guys that are like maybe talented enough, maybe not talented enough, because you're also trying to get the talent to a certain level. So, you're taking some risk at the end. Does that make sense? And so
it does.
So we just said, let's not take the risk. Let's keep everybody really, really close to the top. And so that every time there's an ankle injury, every time there's a back injury, this guy knows in practice, I got to be ready to go because I have an opportunity. And so I was really proud. This year we got fired in March. They only had 2 guys transfer out. Everyone else stayed.
Okay.
Which I thought was huge.
Yeah.
I thought it's funny because I look at it and I go, we were actually, the stuff we put in place really allowed for some continuity. And if we would have stayed there, Breon Freeman and Joe Bamisile would have stayed too. We would have had an entire group back, which would be rare in this day and age.
Right on.
But it goes to show that the intentionality of how we built the roster was working.
Absolutely. So I want to ask about the transfers. I want to understand this. Yeah. How do you scholarship a transfer?
The same way. In men's basketball, you have 13 full rides. you know, they just it's easy in men's basketball. In other sports, they have to break them up. We don't have to do that. We just
so
get everything.
So you are trying to leave a scholarship open for that transfer. One of the 13 scholarships is going to that transfer.
And we actually want to make the value higher by making it one of 11.
Okay.
You know, it's like when you go to the club, you're going with your friends, you're going to go out one night. You know, you don't go to the place where you're just walking right in. You go to the place where there's a line.
100.
So we said we need to build a line. So let's not go 13. Let's bring in 11. And if we're going to bring it down to 10, and now there's really meat to that scholarship.
Understand.
You know, if I've got one scholarship left, it really means I have one scholarship left. You got to take this opportunity instead of saying we've got 3 or 4 left. You know, just the meaning of that is a little bit different.